I matched with a guy on Hinge who went missing. He just messaged me.
DisastrousInvolvedI.
Disclaimer: the content presented in this video is purely fictional and intended for entertainment purposes only.
Let me start this story off by saying I have never been a fan of dating apps. I want to make that abundantly clear. They always felt forced. I thought relationships were supposed to come naturally. People always say love comes when you least expect it or whatever, but I've found that it truly does sneak up on you in a sense. I didn't believe anyone could find love through seeking it out online, let alone with these swipes and likes decisions based solely on where a person falls on their scale of attractiveness. However, upon ending a relationship with my boyfriend of 8 years this past December, on Christmas Eve, might I add, I said fuck it and downloaded every dating app one could think of: Hinge, Tinder, Bumble. I even downloaded eHarmony just for the hell of it. I figured I would turn a new leaf, use this app to dispose of my preconceived notions and spice things up in my life. And, boy, did it, I matched with Austin the second day after I had downloaded Hinge. I was lying in bed on a Sunday night, the usual existential dread of the work week ahead hitting me harder than usual. I was searching for a distraction, so I opened the app to see what it was all about. Honestly, at this point, I was still trying to figure out how it worked. I saw all these blurry images of men who had supposedly sent me a like, but every time I attempted to tap on one, I got nothing. I eventually realized I had to start from the top of the list, liking and disliking each man one by one. I was skeptical at first. It felt superficial, sending likes out to men I found appealing while discarding others who were less appealing. There were plenty of messages, too. You cute, huge fan of your parents' work, and what's a gorgeous girl like you doing on this app? Were common. I attempted to read the prompts to see if the answers would provide me with more than a couple of pictures of a guy holding the same fish. But at the end of the day, I got bored of reading and it all boiled down to whether or not I take them to bed. After a handful of dislikes and a feeling of fleeting hope for humanity, I found him. Austin was handsome. The first picture displayed a muscular man with a crown of auburn hair and emerald eyes. Nuzzling his large arm was a golden retriever puppy. I've always had a soft spot for puppies' hot men, so I was immediately enthralled. I scanned his pictures and read some of his prompts. One read: "We'd get along if you also want to delete this app." Upon reading that, I was sold. He was in my likes you list, so all I had to do was send him a like back. The second I tapped the heart button signaling my mutual interest, I figured that was enough Hinge activity for the night. I turned off my phone and fell asleep. The next morning, I awoke to my alarm blaring in my ear. I rubbed my eyes and glanced at my phone, one new message from Hinge. It was from Austin. His message read, "Wow, I didn't expect to get a like back from a beautiful girl like you, but I am not complaining." I blushed, feeling stupid. And that's how it all started. The rest of the day, I spent my time messaging Austin. We went back and forth for hours. There was no hesitancy in his responses, no long periods of waiting for him to message me back. It was a natural and flowing conversation. We had so much in common, both had younger brothers, both loved reading, and we even went to the same high school, though he graduated a few years before I did. I found myself laughing aloud at some of the texts he sent me. At one point during the day, my boss scolded me for being on my phone instead of working. I quickly apologized but continued to message Austin from under my desk. I couldn't help myself. I was beginning to understand why people liked this app so much, that was, until I was watching the news a few nights later. I had just settled into the couch after making myself dinner. I flipped on the TV as I shoveled a spoonful of chili into my mouth. The texts between Austin and I had slowed down around this point, but we were still making great conversation. I had been checking my phone periodically to see if he had responded to my last message, feeling a little foolish. I had known this man for less than a few days and I was already acting like he was my boyfriend. He had every right not to respond immediately. I sighed and scooped another heap of chili into my mouth when an image flashed on the TV screen and I nearly choked. The image was of Austin. It was the same image I had seen on his Hinge profile: bright smile, green eyes, even the golden retriever puppy. I scrambled for the TV remote, knocking over my bowl of chili in the process, I jammed on the buttons of the remote to turn up the volume. And tonight, 27-year-old Austin Jackson has been reported missing after a night out with friends this past Saturday. News reporters are currently on the scene in redacted as a manhunt ensues in hopes of finding him safely. I had stopped listening. A chill ran down my spine. That was Austin. It had to be him. It was the same godforsaken picture he used on his profile. He went missing Saturday night. It was now Thursday. I had matched with him Sunday night. We had been messaging ever since. My brain was desperately trying to make sense of the situation. Was I being catfished? I could have sworn his profile was verified. How was this possible? A sudden buzz from my phone ripped me from my frantic thoughts. One new message from Hinge. I knew it was Austin. I began to sweat profusely, swiping at my brow. Before, a text from Austin gave me butterflies. But now, these butterflies had morphed into bats that were draining the blood from my intestines. Believe me, I considered all the obvious options. I thought of contacting the police, contacting his family, letting them know I was messaging Austin or at least informing them of his presence on social media, but I was being dramatic, right? There had to be a rational explanation for this. I had this tendency to downplay the gnawing feeling in my gut, the one you get when something doesn't feel right, intuition. This was courtesy of my ex, who instilled this self-doubt and depreciation into me throughout the past 8 years. At the time, I concluded that the person I was messaging was not Austin. It was the only explanation I could come up with. The smallest part of me was so curious about who was on the other side of my phone, who I had been communicating with all this time, that I decided to toy with the idea of playing along, at least for a little while longer. I mean, whoever this person was, we were really hitting it off. For all I knew, I was being catfished. There was no possibility, using all of the logical parts of my brain, that a missing man was messaging me. This, in hindsight, was a massive miscalculation on my part. Impulsively, I opened the message from Austin. Sorry for the late response. Just making dinner. Spaghetti and meatballs tonight. My thumbs danced nervously in front of the keyboard. I contemplated my response. After a few minutes, I typed out a reply and pressed send before giving my actions a second thought. Yum. Sounds good. What are you up to now? I watched with near trepidation as 3 animated dots appeared instantly, indicating he was typing. I practically jumped out of my seat when my phone buzzed again. I think I'm headed to bed. I'm exhausted. But I wanted to see if you were around tomorrow. Maybe when you're done with work we could meet up for dinner? My heart leaped into my throat. I genuinely considered this for a moment. What was the worst that could happen? I got along with this guy, right? He had the personality aspect, and honestly, that was all I needed. He was lying to me, but I'm a very confrontational person. I could catch him in the act and call him out on it. Perhaps we could even move past it. I knew I was thinking like a lunatic, but my curiosity would consume me if I didn't meet this guy. I hadn't clicked like this with someone in a long time. I had to know who he was. Maybe it was my relentless spirit of inquiry. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was sheer boredom. I'm not sure what led me to it, but ultimately, I agreed to meet up. The night that followed was sleepless. I couldn't get the image of some horrid-looking man with a scar across his eye out of my head. He would be waiting for me at the dinner table with a syringe and a roll of duct tape, ready to drag me off into the night, never to be seen again. That morning, I arrived at work looking disheveled, but I was more than prepared for this date from hell. Austin and I had planned to meet up at a restaurant down the street from my office. It was usually the busiest spot in town and had decor that lit it up like a Christmas tree, hence, the safest option I could think of. I had packed a can of pepper spray, a pocket knife, and one of those alarms that play an ear-splitting noise with the quick press of a button. There was zero chance of a kidnapping on my watch. I blinked and the workday was over without me so much as getting an email sent, but that was the least of my concerns. By the time I arrived at the restaurant, I was a ball of nerves. I hadn't even looked in the mirror. I had walked, or rather, ran, from work, and sweat dripped from every crevice of my body as I pushed through the entrance. After attempting to pull myself together, flattening my hair and straightening my skirt, I sent a quick text to Austin. Here. He responded in an instant, "Great. I'm already sitting at the bar." I saved you a seat. My head snapped in the direction of the bar. As I suspected, it was packed. But this was good news for me, more witnesses for whatever was about to occur. I noticed every stool was taken except for one. It was next to a man whose back was facing me. I made my way over to him, slowly, ready for a confrontation. Ready for whatever was coming next. Just as I had readied myself for the moment of truth, I was taken aback by a pair of emerald eyes. "Austin? Maria. It's so great to finally meet you." A tall muscular man with hair the color of autumn and eyes so piercing they nearly burned into mine stepped out of his stool, coolly. He leaned in to hug me, large arms wrapping around my now rigid body. He didn't seem to notice. He pulled a stool out for me. "Please, have a seat." I compelled my body to move as I attempted to speak, trying to sound normal, but all I could muster was a short hi that sounded more like a squeak than my voice. Eventually, after too long of a pause resulting in this man's bright eyes turning quizzical, I took a hesitant seat on my stool. No going back now. Austin was standing in front of me. Austin. The man who had appeared on my TV screen last night. The man who had gone missing last Saturday. The world, once again, no longer made sense. I thought I was prepared for this date, but clearly, I was wrong. There had to have been some mistake, I thought. Maybe he's not missing. Maybe his loved ones think he's missing. Perhaps he's estranged. Perhaps he chose Saturday night to start over, a new life with new people, in the same town. I was making excuses now. I knew this. There was zero explanation for the scene in front of me. This was the same man I had seen on my screen. That was a fact. This was the missing man, but, to be fair, Austin was the most beautiful creature I had ever laid eyes upon. Yes, a part of me was on guard and utterly terrified of the situation at play. But the larger part of me was entranced. It was as if he had me under a spell. Though I was feeling a visceral discomfort at first, Austin had this palpable charisma. It became impossible to remain stiff. He was charming. He spoke and my body instinctively responded. We talked for a long time about anything and everything. He was a great conversationalist. He was a gentleman. He was polite. He was smart. He was everything my ex was not. He ticked every one of my boxes. How could I pass up this opportunity because of something I saw on the news? Something I'm not even sure is real? Eventually, I noticed the bartender glaring at me, tapping his finger on the bar, impatiently, probably annoyed that we hadn't ordered something yet. Austin turned to me. I need to run to the restroom. Would you mind ordering me a Jack and Coke? And, of course, whatever you'd like. It's on me. He gave me a quick smile and walked towards the bathrooms. I had, suddenly, forgotten what it was I was afraid of. At this point, I was well aware I was not being catfished. Austin was a normal, if not, highly above average man. I enjoyed spending time with him. There was no reason to get wound up. I'm sure there was a reasonable explanation for all the confusion. I remembered thinking that we'd laugh about this. Someday, if things continued to go well, and what can I get you? The bartender had finally made his way over to me. I'll have a Jack and Coke and a vodka Sprite. The bartender laughed, making up for lost time. Are we? I arched one brow. Excuse me? But he had already scurried off to make our drinks. I was trying to make sense of the bartender's snide comment when Austin appeared next to me. Did you order? Yeah, I think so. But the bartender, I think our table is almost ready, so we need to get going soon. We're going to have to drink quickly. Austin gave me a naughty smile and slung an arm around me. I had to physically stop myself from melting in his arms. All of my troubles, my worries, my confusion, seemed to escape me when I looked into his eyes. The rest of the night was a blissful blur. We continued talking, laughing, eating, and drinking. Well, I was doing most of the eating and drinking. Austin was so distracted by our conversation that he had barely touched his food or drink. Every so often, I'd receive glances from people at other tables, murmurs and whispers. I assumed we were being far too loud as we carried on, but I was completely unbothered. It was, by far, the best date I had ever been on. I looked at Austin and pictured a life with him. I saw kids and a house and a little golden retriever puppy just like the one on his profile. I knew it was too soon to be thinking that way, but I didn't care. He made me feel a way I had never felt before. We left just before closing. The waitress approached me, timidly, telling me it was time to leave. If I wasn't so blinded by the euphoria of the evening, I would describe her tone as scared, her voice shaking slightly. But, again, I was in a state of ecstasy. I didn't want the night to end. After dinner, Austin walked me to my car. I'm not sure what came over me, perhaps it was courage prompted by that last vodka soda, but I brought up the news report I had seen the night before. "Isn't that crazy?" I had said. "The reporter said you were missing as of last Saturday night." Austin had gone quiet. "Austin?" I asked and turned to look over at him. The look on his face was unreadable. At first, he appeared surprised, then confused. Finally, his features settled into sadness. No, not just sadness, it was an overwhelming sense of grief. I was hit with instant regret for my confidence in bringing the subject up, but just as quickly as the sadness appeared, it was gone, replaced by a stoic expression. "Yeah, wow. That's pretty weird." His reply was short and I urged myself to stop talking altogether. I couldn't shake the confusion the conversation incited. I was positive he would provide some sort of explanation for the odd coincidence. Instead, he seemed to want to avoid the topic altogether. That odd gut feeling from earlier began to tickle my senses. Once again, the rest of the walk to my car was silent until he spoke again, just as he reached my car. "Maria?" "Yes. I'm really glad we did this. I had a great time with you tonight. And..." He paused as if struggling with what he was about to say. "I wish things had played out differently." "What do you mean?" I had turned around to face him, eyebrows drawn together in confusion, just as we reached my car. But he was gone. "Austin?" I called out. "Nothing." He was beside me just moments before, practically speaking into my ear. Now, I stood alone in the parking lot with the dark, looming shadows of the surrounding buildings as my only company. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. In the following days, I tried to contact him to no avail. The night after our date, I texted him furiously, demanding answers. I didn't understand why he had just up and left without a proper goodbye. I had the time of my life that night and had only assumed the feeling was mutual. I even tried checking his Hinge profile, but it, too, had disappeared. He must have deleted it, I thought. Hurt and insecurity crept up on me as time ticked on without an answer from Austin. I played back the events of the evening in my head, trying to distinguish what I had done wrong. I had been pacing my kitchen, instinctively turning on the news as I mulled over every interaction we had that night when a breaking story interrupted my restless thoughts. The screen displayed the same photo of Austin, golden retriever and all. As the reporter spoke, "Breaking news, the body of 27-year-old Austin Jackson has been found in the redacted canal along redacted street. Officials say they suspect the body has been in the canal since last Saturday night. Thoughts and prayers are with his family tonight as they mourn the tragic." I turned off the TV.
Until next time, subscribe to stay up to date with all updates. No screamers or shocking moments, only comfort and safety. Bye.